Welcome back to Classic Nostalgia Shows, everyone. It's great to have you with us as we dive into another fascinating corner of entertainment history. We talk a lot about the charming classics, the comedies, the romantic films. But today, Annie, we're going somewhere a little darker.
Oh, I am so excited for this, John. I mean, I love a good old Western or a Golden Age musical, but there's something about the classic monsters that just gets me every time. There's a certain magic to them, isn't there? Long before all the CGI and the huge budgets we see today.
Absolutely. Today, we're really going to explore the movie monsters that terrified early audiences. We're talking about a time when a well-placed shadow or an incredible makeup job was all it took to make people scream in the aisles. These weren't just scary movies. They were cultural phenomena.
Right. I think a lot of people today who are used to really graphic horror might wonder, were these films really scary back then? And the answer, unequivocally, is yes. They absolutely were. People were genuinely terrified by these creations.
They were, and they set the stage for everything that came after. But before Hollywood really got its hands on them, humans have always had this deep-seated need for scary stories, haven't they? I mean, going back centuries, around campfires, in ancient myths, every culture had its boogeymen.
Definitely. Think about it. European folklore is just overflowing with tales of vampires, werewolves, ghosts. The Egyptians had their mummies and curses. Even ancient Greek and Roman myths had their terrifying beasts and supernatural encounters. These weren't new concepts when movies arrived. They were deeply ingrained in the human psyche.
Exactly. And when motion pictures started to emerge in the late 1800s, it didn't take filmmakers long to realize, hey, people actually enjoy being frightened in a communal setting. Silent films started experimenting with ghosts, haunted castles, mysterious creatures, pushing the boundaries.
And the perfect example, even before Hollywood jumped in, is Nosferatu from 1922. That movie is still chilling to this day. Max Schreck's portrayal of Count Orlok was just haunting. It wasn't a Hollywood film, but it absolutely showed what cinematic horror could achieve.
It truly did, and Hollywood was paying very, very close attention, because in the early 1930s, one studio really stepped up and changed everything for horror cinema, and that was Universal Pictures. They just owned the monster genre.
They really did. While other studios were busy with musicals and romances and gangster films, Universal just said, you know what? Let's lean into the supernatural. They took these classic literary monsters and made them into something iconic on screen. And their timing, honestly, couldn't have been better.
The Great Depression was hitting hard. People were struggling, life was uncertain. And for just a few cents, audiences could escape into these dark theaters. They could forget their worries for an hour or so and just be thrilled by castles, mysterious laboratories, and these incredible creatures. It was pure escapism, but with a terrifying twist.
And those films became instant classics. I mean, we're talking about the bedrock of modern horror here, and it all really kicked off in 1931 with a little film called Dracula.
Oh, Dracula. Bela Lugosi as the mysterious count, arriving from Transylvania. That hypnotic stare, the elegant black cape, he became one of cinema's first true horror superstars. It wasn't about gore or jump scares. It was about pure atmosphere.
The silence, the shadows, the slow, deliberate movements, his calm, almost seductive voice. Audiences had rarely seen horror presented with such sophistication. And I mean, that performance became legendary. It influenced every vampire film that followed. Even today, when you think of Dracula, you're picturing a lot of elements from those early Universal films.
It's so true. That classic image, the widow's peak, the high-collar cape, it's all Lugosi. And then, later that same year, Universal dropped another absolute bombshell, Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. What a contrast to Dracula. This monster wasn't inherently evil, he was just tragic. Created through science, rejected by society, totally misunderstood. Boris Karloff's portrayal just absolutely cemented that tragic figure. The heavy boots, the enormous frame, that flat head, the neck bolts. It's such an iconic design.
And it's funny, so many people still call the creature Frankenstein, even though Frankenstein was actually the scientist. But it speaks to how deeply ingrained that visual of Karloff's monster is. He's one of cinema's greatest sympathetic monsters. You felt bad for him even as you were terrified.
Definitely. You felt his pain. And then, in 1932, another terrifying figure emerged from the Universal stable: the mummy. Ancient Egypt was just fascinating audiences at the time, with all the archaeological discoveries and rumors of cursed tombs.
Yes, those newspaper headlines were fueling the public imagination, and Hollywood just took those mysteries and ran with them. Wrapped in aged bandages, driven by an ancient curse, the mummy was a unique kind of monster. He had an intelligence that Frankenstein's monster didn't, and he represented history literally returning from the dead. That atmosphere of the ancient curse, the slow, relentless pursuit. It was chilling.
It really was. And what about The Invisible Man? Released in 1933, imagine just hearing footsteps, doors opening, objects floating, but seeing absolutely nothing. That's a concept that still gives me goosebumps today.
Oh, the special effects for its time were just mind-blowing. It seemed almost magical. The monster wasn't terrifying because of his appearance, or lack thereof, but because you couldn't see him. Your imagination just ran wild, and sometimes, what you can't see is far scarier than anything they could show you.
Absolutely. The unseen horror is a powerful tool. And then we move into the 1940s with the Wolfman. Few monsters represent that human fear of losing control better than him. A normal man transforming into something dangerous against his own will. That's a tragedy many audiences could connect with.
Larry Talbot, played by Lon Chaney Jr., wasn't just a monster, he was a victim. His struggle between his humanity and his primal instinct made him one of Universal's most emotional characters. And honestly, modern werewolf movies, even today, borrow so heavily from those early classics. The Full Moon, The Silver Bullet, it's all there.
It's so foundational, but then, after World War II, audience fears started to change, didn't they? The atomic age arrived, science was advancing rapidly, and Cold War tensions were growing. And Hollywood, as it always does, responded to those societal fears.
Yes, suddenly, monsters weren't just ancient curses or scientific experiments gone wrong in a castle. They emerged from radiation, mysterious space phenomena, mutant creatures. Think gigantic ants, enormous spiders. It was all about the unknown dangers of a new scientific era.
And one of the most unforgettable additions from that era, I think, came in 1954, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Unlike previous monsters, this one lived beneath the water, adding a whole new layer of mystery and primal fear.
The underwater photography was just astounding for its time, and the creature suit, that remains one of the greatest practical costume achievements in movie history. It looked so alien, so aquatic, and yet so perfectly designed. You believed it existed.
You really did. And it makes you wonder, John, for modern viewers, sometimes they'll say, were audiences really frightened by these old movies? And my answer is always a resounding yes.
Absolutely. You have to remember, there were no streaming services back then, no internet, no endless television channels. For many people, these monsters represented visual experiences unlike anything they had ever seen. Going to the movies was an event, and dark theaters amplified every scream, every shadow, every musical cue. It was immersive.
And they discussed these movies for weeks afterward. Kids had nightmares, adults debated whether certain scenes went too far. These films were genuine cultural phenomena because they were so new and groundbreaking. They tapped into something primal.
And what's truly impressive, I think, is how filmmakers achieved these effects. Everything was practical. Makeup artists spent hours transforming actors, often in incredibly uncomfortable ways. Miniatures created impossible landscapes. Camera tricks produced invisible characters, and creative lighting made all the difference.
No computers, no digital animation, just sheer imagination, craftsmanship, and innovation. It's truly amazing what they accomplished with limited technology. Many filmmakers today still look back at those practical techniques with so much admiration and respect.
They absolutely do. And another reason why these films endure is because many of the monsters weren't simply villains. We felt sorry for them, didn't we? Frankenstein's monster just wanted acceptance. The Wolfman wanted freedom from his curse. The creature from the Black Lagoon was just defending his home.
Even King Kong, in his own way, sought companionship. These stories explored loneliness, rejection, fear, and misunderstanding. It really makes you think that sometimes the real monsters in these films were actually the humans. That emotional depth is what truly sets these classic monster movies apart from so many modern horror films that are just about the jump scare.
That's such a great point, Annie. And their legacy, frankly, is immeasurable. Nearly every modern monster owes something to these classics. Without Dracula, we wouldn't have modern vampire films. Without Frankenstein, you wouldn't have the archetype of the sympathetic movie monster. Without Universal's shared horror universe, we wouldn't have the concept of cinematic monster franchises.
They inspired generations of filmmakers. Think about it. Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Tim Burton, Guillermo del Toro, John Carpenter. Countless directors have cited these classic monster movies as early inspirations. Their influence continues almost 100 years later, which is just wild to think about.
It really is incredible. So, as we wrap up today, it's clear the monsters of classic Hollywood were so much more than just scary costumes. They were reflections of society's fears: fear of science, fear of death, fear of loneliness, fear of losing control, fear of the unknown. And yet, they also reminded us that appearances can be deceiving.
Right? Many of cinema's greatest monsters were also its most tragic characters, and their stories continue to entertain audiences because they're built on these timeless human emotions. That's why these classics still matter. So, if you've never explored the monster movies of Hollywood's golden age, please give them a chance.
You might just discover that they're less about horror and more about humanity. Thank you for joining us on another journey through classic cinema here on Classic Nostalgia Shows. It's been a blast, Annie.
It truly has, John. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do subscribe to Classic Nostalgia Shows for more stories celebrating the movies, television shows, actors, directors, and unforgettable moments that defined Hollywood's golden years. Until next time, everyone, keep celebrating classic entertainment, and remember, sometimes the oldest monsters are still the most